This is Tom Cox with Tom on Leadership. I'm doing the second of two parts of my interview with Kent Lewis, and you're listening to the Tom on Leadership Oregon Business Magazine Leadership Podcast. We're recording this on the 20th of December 2013 to kick off the 2014 podcast series. In the first half, you listened to me interview Kent about the merger that he's engineering between his two small businesses, his history of abject failure as an employee, which is kind of the arc of a lot of entrepreneurs. When you're unemployable, it is a sign that either you have a personality disorder or you need to start founding companies, or possibly both. And that's, whatever it takes to grow the economy, as long as it's legal.
Right.
And we talked about the culture. We talked about the way in which the organization has you've needed to clarify as the owner what your vision of life at Anvil, life at Formic is, and through the Credo, the published document that really encapsulates that vision that you had when you were starting to dread coming to work at your own company, that started to create the environment in which the right people were attracted and the people who weren't a good fit could exit.
Yeah.
And that's just been really crucial to your results this past year. I wanted to point out how that is very much a strategic move. If anyone who's listened to me in the past knows that I'm a big fan of Rummelt's book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And he says that there are three things that every strategy has to have: a diagnosis about what's going on, some kind of a policy statement on how we're going to respond to what's going on, and then a plan of coherent action to actually do something about the supposed decision in step two, because a decision without action is not a decision. And the kind of bold change that was precipitated by the Credo, I think fits the definition of noticing that there's a problem, making a very clear decision, and then taking action, some of it yours, some of it forced, some of it the action of others.
Yeah.
And it has dramatically changed the company. And that is a big contrast to a lot of folks who own their own business, who are afraid to make changes, and will limp along in misery or even just sort of a sense of blah, like, oh, I have to go to the office instead of I get to go to the office. And I think you're a good example of the power of being a little bit discontent and a little bit self-centered and saying, wow, if I'm not having fun, I bet others aren't too. If I'm not having fun, I got to change something. And you actually tried that when you hired a CEO in order to back out of the company a little bit, and that didn't work. So yay for you on the strategy side, and my commiseration to you on trying to get a CEO in and having that not work out. Are you yet clear, and you may not be for years yet, why the hired CEO effort failed?
Well, actually, I'm very clear on that. Okay. And, it was a unique set of circumstances to agree.
It's always a unique set of circumstances.
Of literally, having to make a choice. Do I either step back or I lose my longest term employee or my vice president? And so I had to make a choice. And I said, I want you to give this a try. A lot of lessons on mentorship. We brought in a coach, a leadership coach for her. Outstanding. And she worked with all of us. We also, I brought an advisory board in at that point.
I was going to ask you about boards. Let me touch on the coach first. What was the best thing that surprised you or maybe just pleased you about working with an executive coach?
Very little. I had a terrible experience.
I'm so sorry.
And I'll tell you why. It's because I paid the bills, but my interim to hopefully full-time CEO was the client, meaning the woman that was the strategic coach took, in my mind, upon herself. Her goal was to make sure this woman became CEO at any other cost. Oh. So it was pushing out my operations person, pushing me to the back, and I had, she did not buy in any equity, so she had nothing to lose. And so I struggled with the approach, and we did not end on good terms with that consultant. Neither did the entire project.
That's
but
rough.
If I could say one thing I felt like I learned is this woman that was I worked with her for 14 years on and off, mostly on, one of the smartest, most driven, ass-kicking people I've ever worked with. The challenge was misreading things like the fact that she was a world-class marathoner. I thought was going to be it was this huge asset. And what I never really, this is just an example, is that then I never really thought about the fact that marathoning is perhaps one of the most internal sports of all time, in that you rely on virtually nobody else but yourself.
There's no teamwork there.
There's no teamwork there. So you might have a coach.
Nothing wrong.
You might have, in her case, a husband that's very supportive.
Yeah, but you can have, it's an internally directed.
It's not a team sport.
Yeah,
period.
It's an internal discipline sport.
So that that kind of trait that made her a world-class marathoner didn't necessarily make her a world-class
leader of a team.
CEO. I would say she was a brilliant number 2, and it didn't work out. So I guess I would say the biggest lesson there was she was unhappy at number 2 and thought being number 1 would solve all her problems, and that all that additional weight and responsibility just crushed it. It was exacerbated the issue.
Wow.
So we ended badly. I wish it had ended better.
Of course.
We worked really well together as a team, I thought, and then this didn't work. So the first stage was how do I elevated my second in command team under her to an executive level, and that was the second mistake, was hiring people to their highest level of the competence, as the phrase goes. I took really brilliant people and put them out of their comfort zone and out of their strength zone.
Right.
And they were the kind that would just try and try and try, but never come to me saying, I know I will fail, or we've got to make a change. So that's what precipitated the departure. So that by the time I came up with the credo, they're like, I'm done. Yeah. And it was a huge wake up that I thought I was just this wonderful nurturer, this multiplier, and all of that. And it's pretty clear that in some way I was a diminisher. If you've read the book, is that I basically delegated everything, but I didn't have check-in points and really understand their struggles and how to help them.
Right.
So the big change I made when I did the credo was, the first thing I thought of is, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
And then I figured out, how do I want to do it? So what do I want to do is solve clients' problems. And what I realized was the tool set of search marketing, social media marketing, and analytics was a three-part moving engine. It was a Wankel engine, which made us, back in the day...
Give me that again. I want to hear these.
The three-part engine was search, social, and analytics. And the Wankel engine is effectively 3 moving parts for the Mazda RX-7 fans. But the idea is that we had been so focused that I could partner with other agencies and they know that we would never step on their toes and whatever. Well, one trend that precipitated this major change this year was all of my friends started competing. So they said they did SEO even though they didn't, search engine optimization. Or they'd outsource or they'd hire somebody, that's fine. But I was losing those relationships, but I wasn't gaining any ground because there's so many other search marketers out there now.
Right.
So the first thing I realized is I want a bigger toolbox and I want some seasoned staff to come in that had worked at more than one other agency.
Right.
That was a downside to working with my current but primarily former team, was that this was the only place they'd worked by and large. And that really affects your perspective and ability to see the bigger picture.
There's something about breathing your own exhaust for too long.
Yeah.
And being only, if you grow up in a single environment, you think that's how it is.
As great as I thought it was, and as great as they probably wanted to think it was, I think that you start to second guess if this really is as good as it gets. And it was clear to me that I didn't agree at the time, but I totally agree now, is that it's time to move on at some point.
Right.
My whole goal originally was to build a family. We all worked together until we retired. And then I realized that's, even my former CEO said that is back 8 years ago, that's so naive. You're going to try to get 3 to 5 years out of anybody and be grateful when they leave. And I was like, no, I totally disagree. She was right. That it was a mark of success to have such high retention of employees until it totally failed. That high retention became a liability.
Interesting.
So now that I have well over 100% employee turnover this year, that's too much turnover, by the way. But my whole goal with this credo was to retool a team that was passionate about the things I was passionate about, that believed in what I believed, and I think that worked. But the first thing I did was branch out to integrated marketing, and I hired a 17-year agency veteran I worked with more than a decade ago to say, I want you to sell everything else that we don't do in-house and just outsource that. I don't want to build a full-service agency. I just want to offer my clients a full toolbox. So the success is he brought in a rebranding project right out of the bat from a former coworker. Then he redid our identity, which is, I think, brilliantly executed. Nice. Really proud of that. Our new website, all of that. And then we also did a 6-figure e-commerce website for a local truck manufacturing components company. And we just now are doing TV spots for Advantis Credit Union, one of our long-term clients.
Outstanding.
So we're now branching into that, and I think it's exciting for the current team that does our 90% of what we do is core search, social analytics,
Yeah.
but they get to see this bigger picture that we're now a part of, and it's very exciting
No
for this
kidding.
new team.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it's important for your culture to bring in outside people from time to time.
Yes.
It's important to let people move on when it's right for them to move on. And that lifetime employment for a Japanese auto worker is a different model than the employment path and the career path
Yeah.
for someone in this kind of high tech.
Yeah. I saw Gung Ho and I was totally thought that was an amazing movie, back in the day, if you remember that movie. But I'm very, this has been an extremely humbling, I wouldn't go as far as humiliating. It's just been the biggest growth opportunity of my life, for sure.
Well, I will say this is either an encouraging or a daunting comment. While experience is mandatory, learning is optional. And
Yes.
I get the impression that you have been learning. The Portland Ad Federation's roundtable
Yes.
is a model for, I think, what a lot of CEOs could and should be doing.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear more about what that experience is.
Yes.
The Portland Ad Federation, of course, is a collection of competitors. And as Adam Smith wrote in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations, that when a bunch of capitalists get together, the first thing that comes on the agenda, according to him, is how can we fix prices and reduce our competition, which of
That's
course
exactly now
which
illegal.
lasts, which is illegal, and it lasts until the end of the meeting, and everyone goes out and competes again because you can't trust anybody to hold to that kind of a cartel without some kind of outside force. OPEC has found that everybody finds out who tries it. And that's the power of competition.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I've listened to you very closely between this interview and the one we just completed, part one, and you keep coming back to your clients' needs, reinventing yourself to serve clients better or differently, and that intense focus you have as CEO on the customer, to me, is one of the things that I look for in excellence in a CEO. So it's nice to hear it from you. How does the Portland Ad Federation's roundtable serve you in your growth and your improvement?
Good question. So I wasn't aware of that whole fair trade, collusion and all of that. But it was pointed out that the roundtable, PF is the oldest continuously running ad club in the country.
Really?
108 years old or more.
Wow.
It used to be a bunch of guys with cigars back at the turn of the century,
Sure.
Newspaper guys and whatever. And there's a subset. So there's the media side, there's the vendor side, and there's the agency side.
Okay.
So of the agencies, there are about 40 agency owners, operators that get together, a subset that get together every month.
How many?
Probably between 10 and 18 get together in a given month. To collaborate and share. We are not aware of any other city doing this. It's unusual to get together with your direct competitors and
Right.
collaborate.
Right.
So we don't talk rates,
Right.
and that's about it. So
Okay.
everything else is biz dev best practices,
Right.
HR, operations, marketing, sales.
Well, and unlike a bunch of bakers who are constrained by geography, your customers are all over the United States. These 10 to 18 people, in theory, you're competing
Yes.
with each other, but more to the point, you're competing with the whole rest of the U.S. and every
Yes.
other agency out there, of which there are something like 5,000 or 10,000.
Yes.
So,
This gives us a huge edge over other cities. Originally one of the core mission of the roundtable was make sure that we put Portland on the map for creative services and creative services on the map for Portland.
That's all we have time for.
You're listening to the Tom on Leadership broadcast, courtesy of Oregon Business Magazine, kicking off our 2014 interview series. Thanks so much for listening.